Okay, it's a few minutes after the start time, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is John Fulton from BMC. Very excited about today's webcast. It's part 3 of our CMDB webcast series around the Remedyforce CMDB. Today's focus will be around our latest enhancement integrations between Remedyforce and BMC Discovery. I'm fortunate enough to have Duncan Grisby on the line with us today, who will be covering the BMC Discovery side of the solution to give you an overview. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So as mentioned with the agenda, we're going to start off with an overview. Duncan's going to walk through an overview of the Discovery solution to give those that aren't familiar with that solution an understanding of the capabilities and the benefits. Then I'm going to jump into specifics around the enhanced integration and benefits of that enhanced integration, and highlight and contrast the differences between the older integration that we launched a number of years ago with Discovery and this new integration that was just became GA. Was it a couple weeks ago with the release of the Discovery 11.3 release. And then both Duncan and I are going to walk through a demonstration. He's going to walk through a demonstration of Discovery, highlight some of the key capabilities and benefits, so that you can actually see the solution in action. I'll highlight the integration and show you how that information is passed into the Remedyforce solution to give you really to leverage the strength of Discovery from within Remedyforce. And then we'll just end with a summary and a number of calls to action to consider as a result of the various topics that we cover today. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Duncan. Duncan?
Thanks, John. Hello, everyone. As John said, I'm the architect of BMC Discovery, so I'm responsible for kind of the design and architecture of how the system works together. So I'm going to go through a little bit of background about why it's important to have a good source of discovery information about your IT environment, and then talk about some of the reasons that we believe BMC Discovery is the best tool of its kind in the industry, and how it can really help you manage your IT environment in a much more effective manner. So the background to why it's more important than ever to have a good discovery tool in your environment is that there are constant pressures on businesses to make their IT environment more effective, more efficient, and make use of all of the new things that are coming along, all the buzzwords of the day, and not just buzzwords, the real things that the IT departments are pressured to support, not just their traditional on-premise IT infrastructure, but also to move workloads into the cloud, to make use of new capabilities such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, to deploy and to build applications in new, more open and more modular ways so that the business can have flexibility. And really the background to this as to why discovery of what you have in your environment is so important is all of these new things that are coming along. None of them make the environment simpler. They all make it more complex. That a lot of the people pitching cloud solutions say that you end up more simple when you get there, but actually the journey to get there is definitely a hard and complex journey, and the environment you end up with at the end has many moving parts, many types of systems, many different responsibilities within an organization, many different groups responsible for managing bits of the environment. And so knowing what you have and why you have it becomes more and more essential in managing your environment effectively. Moving on, I just want to check the slide moved for, did the slide move on to slide 4, John? Yes. So one of the big shifts that's happening to IT at the moment is a shift from traditional IT, where everything runs in data centers on your own premises, to a world where many of the essential applications that are used by a business to run its own business are not hosted by the business themselves, but are run in cloud services. The vast majority of organizations are moving at least some of their computing into cloud environments. And obviously, the people on this call, well, in the context of using Remedyforce, if you're using Remedyforce, you have already chosen to move your IT service management into a cloud-based service, which is our Remedyforce service, but increasingly organizations are moving more and more of their workloads into the cloud. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing left behind on-premise. Most organizations, for the foreseeable future, will have a lot of essential parts of their infrastructure left in their own data centers or in co-located facilities or whatever, but not new cloud environments. And so things just become more and more complicated over time. And so there's these pressures to move applications from your current environment into the cloud, to decide which ones can be moved to a cloud environment, having chosen which things to move to a cloud environment, to understand, okay, what's involved in moving this application into the cloud. And it's very hard to do that if you don't know about everything about how things are currently deployed in your environment. And so part of the value of a discovery tool like BMC Discovery is that it will tell you all the things that is split, that the knowledge about what's where in your environment, why you have it, is spread amongst a very large number of different groups of people. So that this slide is trying to indicate that the complicated, interconnected organizational structure within a lot of organizations about different teams of people who manage different parts of the IT infrastructure, and how you want to take all of that and shift it to be hosted in a cloud environment. And to do that kind of thing, you really need to have a good understanding of what's currently running, why it's running, where it's running, how it depends on it, and how the different parts of the system depend on each other. So what does BMC Discovery do? Well, BMC Discovery, as the name suggests, it discovers things. And what it discovers is the vast majority of the assets that you have in... Something weird is happening with the slides. I think we want to go on slide 7 now. I think the slides got left behind. I was moving the slides. I'm not sure I think they got left behind. So what does BMC Discovery do? BMC Discovery manages, it discovers everything in your environment. So in your traditional IT infrastructure, you have servers, you have network infrastructure, you have storage devices, you have hyper-converged devices that do an element of storage and networking and compute. You have mainframes. This is an example of how, well, people are shifting workloads to the cloud, and people are talking about how they're moving their traditional Unix and Windows servers from on-premise to the cloud. But in many organizations, their business still hinges on mainframes. And so as new things come along in the industry, a lot of the old things don't in fact go away. They stay there. And so what BMC Discovery does is it understands all of these things in your environment, and it will discover them at an asset level. It will tell you the hardware you have, the virtual hardware you have, so virtual machines. But probably more important than that is it will tell you about the dependencies between these things. It will tell you that not just this server here is a particular type of server, it was made by a particular manufacturer and this is its serial number, which is useful from an asset management point of view. It will also tell you the software that's running on that server and what it's doing for you, the versions of it, so that you can understand risk of out-of-date versions or vulnerable versions. And it will tell you the dependencies between those bits of software and other pieces of software in the environment, which allows you to understand why have I got what I've got in my infrastructure. On top of that, you can teach Discovery what these things mean to your business. So we talk about application modeling in Discovery, and what application modeling means is not finding the parts of your application or even finding the dependencies between them, but labeling them, grouping them together and say these things together are working to provide an application that is essential for my business. And so by modeling your applications, you can give business context to the Discovery data. And all of this you can do within BMC Discovery. And many of the use cases for the data can actually be satisfied directly by interacting with Discovery by using its user interface, which we'll show in the demo a little later. You can you can make use of the data, you can mine the data, you can perform reports on the data. But a lot of the data becomes most valuable when it is synchronized into other consuming applications, in particular synchronized into a CMDB. And so by synchronizing data from Discovery into your Remedyforce CMDB, you can now make use of the configuration items found by Discovery and the dependencies between them to help directly enable your IT service management processes. So you're no longer operating your IT service management processes purely as a people-based process, but you're basing it on real facts about the IT environment in which you're managing. And so this is the real value of Discovery, that it tells you not just what you have, but it goes a very long way to answering the question about why you have it. And that's the thing that's most essential and the thing that's most unique to BMC Discovery in terms of the depth of its ability to discover connectivity between things. If we move on, John, I think you're in control of the slides, John. So I'm going to hand over to John now to talk about the new integration that we have with BMC Discovery and Remedyforce.
Great. Thanks, Duncan. Great overview. So, you know, what I want to cover here in the next few slides before we get into a demo is to highlight the strengths of this integration and also contrast it with the older integration. We are encouraging any existing customers that are using the older integration to move to this new integration, and the enhanced integration is designed for those customers to migrate from the old to the new. I'll get into a little bit more detail on specifics here towards the end of the session, but hopefully you'll agree with these enhancements. There is a very compelling reason to migrate to this new integration. The first one, as Duncan highlighted, one of the key themes is around multi-cloud discovery. So, you know, with BMC Discovery, with the focus of the data center and the focus of customers moving to the cloud, you know, cloud and hybrid cloud are common requirements for customers. And with Discovery, I think it was the 11.2 release of BMC Discovery, they introduced cloud discovery. We're up to the 11.3 release now, and with this enhanced integration, we're leveraging the discovery of cloud instances. So in this case here, I just have an example of Azure in the screenshot with the various components. And one of the things from my perspective, Remedyforce perspective, and understanding and learning more about Discovery, BMC Discovery, is it is very powerful in what it can discover in the data centers. And it does go to a much granular level. It'll discover databases, for example. And one of the things that I encounter in talking to customers is, well, how's this BMC Discovery different than Remedyforce agentless discovery or BMC client management? And I'm not going to go into all the details on today's session. There are sort of basic commonalities around discovering some level of CIs, but you know, this BMC Discovery identifies the relationships. It goes much deeper into the components that are being discovered and the software and the applications that are being discovered. It supports application dependency mapping. I'd encourage you to take a look at the FAQ that we have on the community site, either the new one that we created between Remedyforce and BMC Discovery, or if you look at the Remedyforce agentless discovery FAQ. Both those FAQs go into detail on how BMC Discovery is different than these other discovery mechanisms. And ultimately, they complement each other. So the fact that you would have one versus the other would not mean that one of the other tools wouldn't still provide added value. So again, getting back to the enhancements, we talked about multi-cloud discovery and how it can discover public or private cloud instances. Support for application, services, and relationships. These are another two big enhancements. The concept of applications, how you can define sort of logical groupings and identify what those applications consist of. Say you have an ERP system with databases, hubs, routers, switches, servers. You can discover that, as Duncan mentioned, in all the relationships, and you can create that logical grouping and view that as an application within Remedyforce. So when you define that logical grouping within Discovery, that application will also be migrated into Remedyforce so you can see that same type of relationship. And then again, not to diminish the concept of relationships, and the older integration with Discovery, we did not import these relationships. So as you'll see in the demo today, a tremendous amount of information plus the relationships will now be passed automatically into Remedyforce. The additional classes, we moved from 6 to 28 classes. So for those of you that have the older integration that are leveraging Pentaho, we provided 6 out-of-the-box classes. If you wanted to import other classes, you would have to modify those classes and in essence create a customization and maintain that going forward. We've taken a completely different approach. We've identified all the relevant classes that BMC Discovery discovers today, which are 28, and import those into Remedyforce. So no longer do you have to worry about any kind of customization or modifying Pentaho, which takes me to the next slide. Actually, the point on the bottom, I'm going to go from bottom to top here. No Pentaho is required. If you're upset about that, feel free to reach out to me, but I have yet to run into a customer that's upset that we've removed Pentaho. So no longer do you have to install a third-party application to get the integration set up with BMC Discovery. The new integration, we spent a significant amount of time in working with Duncan and his team to really simplify the setup, leveraging API calls. We've added UIs into both applications so that it's a very simple setup, which I'll drill into in a little bit more detail in a minute. The other aspect, too, is we've added automated updates. So not only do we have this concept of a continuous scan where if any incremental changes occur within Discovery, those updates are passed directly into Remedyforce, so we have a sort of a near real-time kind of update. We have some workflow that we built in to the solution. There are optional workflow rules to where maybe you want to update the status of a CI within Remedyforce if the device hasn't been scanned after 5 scans. So I think the default for BMC Discovery is that after 5 scans, a record will be marked as inactive if it's not discovered after 5 additional scans. With our workflow, you can leverage our workflow to say, okay, after those 5 scans, not only do I want to mark it as inactive within Remedyforce, I may want to change the status to missing or some unique status so you can differentiate between those exceptions and the other devices that you're managing within Remedyforce. And then here's a table, and this is actually in the FAQs that I made reference to earlier, just again to sort of summarize the key differences between the older integration to the new integration. Again, to encourage anybody that's on the older integration to move to the new integration. We went from the 6 to 28 classes again, so you don't have to do any customization if you want to expand beyond the 6, because now we include all the classes. We support applications, so from an application dependency mapping perspective, which is another strength of Discovery, we leverage that kind of view within Remedyforce. As mentioned, we support cloud assets, so both the public and private cloud discovery of assets can be automatically imported. And then relationships. In the older integration with Discovery, we did import subcomponents, meaning that if you imported processors, operating system, for example, we automatically created that relationship between the computer system and those subcomponents. That was the only relationship we created. We didn't leverage the relationships that were discovered directly from BMC Discovery. Now with this new integration, we have pulled in all the relevant relationships automatically into Remedyforce, and as you'll see in my part of the demo, you can see those relationships similar to what Duncan will show you here in a minute. And then we have the concept of relationship management, meaning that if something becomes inactive, again, that example I just gave of that server maybe wasn't discovered after 5 scans, so it became inactive, we will automatically flag that device as marked as deleted, which is our inactive flag in Remedyforce. And then any associated relationships will also be marked as deleted or inactive. And then you can leverage the enhancement that we delivered in Remedyforce in Winter 18, where you have the option to filter and only show active or all records, depending on your scenario. And then last but not least, as mentioned, we have removed the dependency of needing to install Pentaho. No longer do you have to install Pentaho. It's all done directly through the 2 solutions and the UIs that we provided within our latest releases. Okay. The one key point to make, again, depending on where you are with Remedyforce, number 1, you have to be on Winter 18 to leverage this new integration. And if you already own Discovery, you have to be on the latest release, which I think came out again about 2 weeks ago, the 11.3 release. So those are the two minimum releases you need to be on to leverage this new and improved integration. And again, as I mentioned, for those customers that are using the old integration, we've designed the logic to support the migration from the old to the new. There's some sort of magic that happens in terms of the old keys and the new keys that are needed to establish a link, but we've added logic to handle that. There's a few conditions which are documented online in the Winter 18 release, so again, I encourage you to take a look at that, and obviously if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or your BRM to further discuss that topic. I did want to highlight the additional classes just for reference. Again, this is in the FAQ, but just to give you a sense of the scope of what we added out of the box compared to what we had. On the left-hand side represents the 6 classes that we provided through the Pentaho older mechanism, and then the 22 are the additional ones plus the 6 that we're adding in the new integration all out of the box. So again, you can see a pretty extensive list of classes, and because they're all the relevant classes that Discovery discovers, there won't be any additional classes at this time that would be needed to be added to this list. One more slide. Sorry, I forgot I had a few more slides here. I did want to highlight the simplicity of the setup. Again, for those familiar with the older setup with Pentaho, quite a few steps, mainly just to set up Pentaho and get that configured, especially if you had to customize it. And so we did spend a lot of time making sure that this was a very simple setup, a couple key steps. And again, this is documented in detail within our online documentation, but I wanted to give you a high-level sense of simplicity. This step 1 is creating a connected app, and this is simply the mechanism that's required through Salesforce to create a secure connection. We leverage that mechanism to create a secure connection with BMC Discovery. What this does is it creates a couple keys that will be entered when you get to step 2. So step 2 is, well, step 1 takes literally probably 2 minutes to create a connected app. When you get to step 2, you're going to go into BMC Discovery, and you're going to go to the UI where there's the concept of a CMDB sync, and you're going to create a new CMDB sync connection. You'll simply select Remedyforce. You'll enter those keys that were created through the connected app. You'll save that, and then step 3 is your configuration of that connection, where you have the ability to identify what you want to import. For example, you may want to limit to only import to a certain class of devices or a certain IP range. Whatever the filter is, you can be very precise as to what you want to import. You can define blackout windows when you do not want to report or run a sync. If you want to run continuous sync and maybe during business hours you don't want to run it, you have the option to define those blackout hours. And there's a few other sort of administrative support troubleshooting options with a resync. And what's nice is there's a UI where you can see the activity. So once you initially run the import, you can see the status of how many records are being imported. If there are any potential errors, you can go to this screen to see all that activity. So again, very simplistic setup, and I set this up right before this demo, I think a day or 2 ago, and I think it took me maybe 10 minutes to go from end to end and getting this all set up. And for me to do that is saying a lot, so pretty impressive. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Duncan. Duncan, you want to provide a demo of BMC Discovery?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think you need to make me the presenter so I can share my screen.
You are now the presenter.
I am now the presenter. And I merely need to find the bit that lets me present my screen. Here it is. So I'm hopefully now sharing my screen.
I can see it.
Okay, if you can see it, hopefully everyone else can see it as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give an overview. I'm going to try and get rid of this thing that Webex has put in front of. I'm going to give an overview of some of the features of Discovery, just as features of Discovery itself, and then briefly show the user interface that John was just talking about how the connection into Remedyforce is discovered. And then, because he's more expert at it than I am, I'm going to hand back over to John, who will show you some of the same data from this instance of Discovery that is presented in the Remedyforce user interface. So, well, first of all, I'm going to log into the system. This system I'm showing here is a demo system that contains it's real data. It's real data based on really scanning genuine environments, but it's been massaged and anonymized a bit so that it doesn't reveal the source. But everything I'm showing here is genuine out-of-the-box discovered data. It's not, there's no smoke and mirrors here. This is all real stuff. So this is the homepage dashboard. I'm logged in as this chap called Alan, who is not me, but he's a standard example demo user that we have within BMC. The homepage dashboard, there's a number of different dashboards. I'll show another one later. This default dashboard just shows you an overview of some of the things you might be interested in. There's a What's New channel, which is just giving us an idea of what's new, and you can see that, well, the top item that's new in the 11.3 release is the integration with the Remedyforce CMDB and some other things as well. There's various other features. This is to do with application modeling. I'm not going to spend much time looking at application modeling today, but we allow you to provide business context to the discovered data, which is really what we refer to as an application model. If I scroll down the display a little bit, there's information about the status of the discovery process in terms of scanning the environment. So you can see that discovery is currently running in the sense that it could be active, but in fact it's not currently actually scanning anything. There's a brief summary of CMDB synchronization activity that can be actually synchronizing to both the Remedyforce CMDB and the Remedy CMDB. You can do both simultaneously if you have both available. There's also a quick view of some of the data, but a better way of looking at the kind of data we collect in Discovery is to go and explore the data. So if I go to this Explore Data section, this shows you a pretty good overview of all the types of data that are collected by Discovery. I'm not going to drill into all of these, of course, it would take rather too long, but I'll give you, it's a good way of getting an overview of the types of information we collect in terms of the assets and the systems that we found. So there's a section of services and applications, which are things that the business context I've attached. There's very little in this demo because we haven't done any. We have information about hosts and containers. So this is servers. You can see mainframes, virtual machines, clusters of things, hardware containers, which are like hyperconverged devices, of Nutanix devices and things like that. There's a section about storage, which finds storage devices. So these are SAN systems and network attached storage that collects information about the devices themselves, but also all of the storage volumes and the connections between those storage volumes and file systems, so that you can understand how your storage is used in the environment. There's a section on software and databases, which is basically all of the important software running in your environment, the databases, components of software, and also packages and patches that are installed on servers, which are quite important from a risk and security point of view to understand the spread of what software you've got installed where. Of course, there's a section on network to do with network devices, so switches and routers and load balancers, the load balance services, which are some of the most important parts of your network infrastructure because they are often the entry points to applications. And then, of course, as we've been talking about, the move into cloud scanning, that a lot of what is deployed into cloud environments are in fact virtual machines, and so cloud virtual machines end up in the virtual machines section. But there's also, of course, cloud providers. So cloud providers are things like Amazon Web Services is a cloud provider, Azure is a cloud provider. There's also private cloud providers like OpenStack that we can scan these things by talking to their APIs and collect a great deal of deep information and dependency information about things deployed into the cloud. To continue the demo, I'm going to just click on some databases. John was mentioning databases. There's a new thing that is available within the data in Remedyforce. Well, I'm going to show you some databases in this data here. So I'm just going to show a couple of the simple features that are available within the data browsing within Discovery, because it's it shows some of the power of exploring the data. So here I've got a list of databases. I've got 1,200 odd databases. A lot of these, the first ones, it's sorted alphabetically, and they happen to be a bunch of databases running on some mainframe infrastructure. So, well, I don't want to get sucked into there. But I can show you some common features that are available in all of the data browsing. So all of the data can be filtered in. This is like the Excel column filter. You can do that to all of the data within Discovery. I can choose to filter the data, but I'm not going to do that. I'm instead going to do this, which is that for all of the data, I can get a chart of some of the data. So I can say I'd like a pie chart, which will show the split of types of databases, because I happen to click through that. And I can do this for any of the data. So I'm going to click through and have a look at some SQL Server databases, because they're probably more in most people's understanding. And now I've got a list of just the SQL Server databases, which gives me information. Well, they're all SQL Server database now, but the name of the database and the software that the database is running inside, because databases run on database servers. I'm just going to pick one of these. These ones, the database name involves something to do with Citrix, so I'm just going to have a look at this as an example of some of the data that can be found for this particular bit of, say, this particular database that's running on a system. And now, quickly, I can see one of the core parts of the system, which is a quick visualization, so a picture of this database. This chap highlighted in green is the database I just clicked on, and you can immediately see some context about how it connects to the rest of my infrastructure. So you can see that this database is inside a SQL Server software instance, we call it. So that's the actual server running, that's the software that's running, which is running on this particular computer. And we can see that, unsurprisingly, the database had a name, something to do with Citrix. Well, it's connected to a Citrix presentation server, which is running on this host over here. There's also some Azure AD Connect thing. Honestly, I don't know what that is, but you can see that that's also talking to the same database server. So very quickly, you can see the context of how the data in Discovery has been related to other information that it has discovered. So I've immediately got a view of software running on 3 different computers in my environment and how they connect together. If I scroll down a little, there's not much to say about an individual database. So all I can really see is the name of the instance and that it's running in this server. If I click through to the server, however, I've got some more information. So now I've clicked through, I've got a very similar visualization. It's different because the database that was extracted, because it was what I was looking at, is now inside. It's one of these 11 in here. So the visualization is basically the same. But if I scroll down, you can now see some of the deep information that we collect about software. So this is a SQL server. We collect information about versions, so it has both a kind of a version number in terms of a number and a marketing version, which is 2012, and patch information. If I scroll down a little further, you can see, well, it's got a list of all of the databases that are running inside that server. One of them is where we started. I'll skip this bit for a second and talk about the fact that one of the key things about the database in Discovery is that it's a very flexible NoSQL database that can store a lot of extra data. And so you can see here, as well as some standard things like versions and well, kind of names and versions of software, which everything has, I've also got some SQL Server specific data, which is in this case where it's storing its data. So this is the path that this particular database server is storing its data. And that's very specific to SQL Server, that data is available, but that's available in the system to be reported on and exported and made use of, just like all of the more standard data. The little thing I skipped over is interesting because this is not discovered information. This is contextual information that Discovery knows on the back of a library of information about products, in that it is telling us that the version of SQL Server here went out of support 8 months ago. So I can easily do reporting to understand the risk to my business of the out of support software, the out of support operating systems that I have. With that in mind, I'm going to go back and look at a different dashboard. So here I'm back to my default dashboard I had before. We have a number of dashboards, and one of them that is is similar to the information I was just showing about a piece of software. This is an operating system risk dashboard, which I have some charts that show the spread of usage of different operating systems. The numbers are all quite small because this demo system doesn't have many computers in it. But here again is a chart of product risk about operating systems. So you can see that actually quite a lot of the data in this demo system is out of support in one way or another. But again, you can click through to quickly see, say, I'm clicking through a segment of those computers whose operating system is out of support, also end of life rather. So here are a bunch of machines that are running Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 6.8, and that is end of life, but it's still in support. So it's end of life, Red Hat want you to move away from it, but they're still supporting it. So this is a very useful kind of combination of discovered information and knowledge that Discovery has about the world, which knows about these versions. Since I'm here, I will click through to this computer, and I can show some of the sort of information we collect about computers as well. So here again is a visualization that highlights the host I happen to be viewing in with a green border, and I can see some software that's running directly on this computer, but also I can see its connectivity into another computer that's running some similar software. So I don't really care what this thing is running. It's running something to do with JBoss and Apache Web Server, but you can see the connectivity of it, and you can also see how it's providing a service through a load balancer of something called MDM Hub, which I have no idea what that might be, but if I did, I can see immediately the risk to that MDM Hub application based on the fact that the computers running inside it are running an end-of-life operating system. If I scroll down a little past the visualization, you start seeing information about a computer. We collect all the kind of obvious information about, well, who made it, but in this case it's a virtual machine, so the hardware is not hardware at all, it's a VMware virtual machine. Information, if I scroll down, about the operating system and its detailed version and the version of the Linux kernel because it's a Linux virtual machine. Information about the hardware, or in this case the virtual hardware because it's a virtual machine, like its serial number, its networking connectivity, its file systems, and so on. And again, here's a piece of information that's collected as a result of dependency connectivity. This is its network interfaces, and Discovery knows the network switch that this host is connected to, and there's a little red cross here if I say I'd like to show some details. The reason for this is that it can see that as far as the host is concerned, the server believes that it's got a 10 gigabit network connection. The switch end believes it's a 20 gigabit connection. So there's a mismatch between what the switch thinks and what the host thinks. Now that may or may not be a problem, but it's something that's of interest to the network team as to why does their switch believe something different to what the host believes. But there's a lot of this kind of depth of information about the dependencies between things that is revealed within Discovery's data, and much of it finds its way into the CMDB as well. Moving on to some other useful features. Something that's, again, unusual about the database within Discovery, that as well as being very flexible in terms of storing extra data like I showed with the SQL Server, it has a full text index of absolutely all of the data. So every last bit of data stored in the system has a full text index on it. And so I can very quickly search for anything that might have been discovered and find, well, everything that refers to it. So I'm going to search for a thing called Jira, which is a defect tracking tool, which is a kind of bug tracking and project tracking tool, which I happen to know there's some data about this in the environment. And you can see very quickly it finds a very large number of types of results because, as I say, all of the data's indexed, and so I have all sorts of, down here, the unlikely results. I have files and processes and SNMP data even that has referenced the word Jira that I typed in. But I'm not going to focus on any of that. I'm going to look at some more likely things. I have an application instance that was, if you remember the front page, I'd modeled a Jira application. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to look at some load balancer services, which are the entry points to applications. and, well, it's found a few, and I'm just going to draw a picture of all of them. So I'm going to say, select all of these and draw me a picture. At which point, I've now got a rather more extensive visualization. So this visualization now is showing all of the load balancer services. I happen to pick 7, I think, and 6 of them all got grouped together because actually they're working together to be over here, and there's one over here. So I've got without any context, what am I looking at here? Well, we have some other contextual information in the system. If I choose a display option, I can say highlight some locations in some cloud regions within this data. So you can now see visually that there are 2 different groupings. They were separated anyway, and there's nothing joining them. These ones, if I hover over it, you can see these are in a location called Manchester, which is one of the data centers in our demo data that is containing this. This is an on-premise instance of an application. This is AWS US East. So this is Amazon Web Services US East region. So I've found 2 instances of a Jira application. One of them is running on-premise. One of them is a cloud-hosted service running in AWS. And this shows the power of cloud discovery, that I've discovered the same kind of information, the same kind of dependency information of something running in the cloud service. And this really helps me. If I'm moving my application from on-premise to the cloud, then this kind of context of have I got all of the right bits, have I got everything that I need to have I resolved all the dependencies between them, it's easy to visually see this within the data. So there are many things that I could show, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly show the interface to CMDB synchronization, then I'll hand over to John, who will be able to show some of the same things within the Remedyforce UI. So in the administration section, I have many things that I can configure about BMC Discovery, but the thing of interest is CMDB synchronization. And you can see here that I have a number, in this case 1, of CMDB connections. As I say, we can also synchronize into the Remedy CMDB, in which case you might have a Remedyforce and a Remedy connection. If I click through to this chap, because it's already configured, it defaults to showing you the status information. Here I can see information about, well, there's no CMDB version because that's not pertinent to Remedyforce in the same way it is to Remedy CMDB, but I can see information about what has been synchronized into the CMDB. So you can see it has inserted information about 358 devices, which are things like servers and network devices. And here is a list of some of the most recent synchronized devices, which gives you an overview of what data has been written, how many CIs have been created and deleted in relationships. Because everything's perfect, we have no error messages, but as John said, anything that goes wrong in the synchronization, if it does, is shown within this user interface as well. You don't have to resort to looking at log files. You can see within the user interface what worked and what didn't. I'm not going to go through all of the tabs, but you can see tabs around filtering and blackout windows and so on. But I'll quickly show you the simplicity of the configuration, as in how you set up the connection. You have a name, which is merely the name that gets shown here, which is only useful if you have more than one. It's a Remedyforce connection as opposed to one of the other CMDB accesses. And then, really, all you have provided are the username and a password and a couple of secrets which come from the setup of the connected application, and that's all you need to provide. So to set up a new connection, you provide those small number of things. This is about a web proxy in case Discovery is behind a web proxy and can't see the internet. It might have to go to a web proxy, but often it can directly connect, and you provide information about those things, and that is all you need to provide in order to enable this integration. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to John, who will quickly be able to show the equivalent at the Remedyforce end, and I think I probably need to switch presentation.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, I did see it, now it's gone. No, it's back.
Is it back?
Yep, it's back.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so what I wanted to show is just, again, the fact that Duncan's gave a great overview of Discovery, and it's always impressive to me to see the wealth of information. And I think the one thing that really hit home with what one of the things Duncan said is it's not the what, it's the why, right? So, not only discovering what is in your environment, but with the relationships and the depth of those relationships and the components, that allows you to start to infer or identify the why, to understand those kinds of relationships. So in Remedyforce, just that same instance that Duncan was demonstrating, all that information was imported into my Remedyforce instance here. So we're viewing a similar set of information. And there's just a couple examples I wanted to pull up. I did a advanced filter here just to look up everything that's JIRA related. So I'm going to pull up a device here. And there's quite a bit of information that's imported here, but again, the key here is the visualization to understand relationships. But if I click on the relationship tab, you'll see, again, all automatically created. So all the same relationships that we're viewing on the discovery side, we're seeing here through this, Remedyforce view, but then we also have the Explorer view. And then depending on the data, this one has a lot of data, so maybe it wasn't the best one to select. But so it shows you all the relationships around that one device that I selected, which in this case was a computer system that's running, in this case, JIRA. The one thing I wanted to highlight too is if, say, I'm involved with my local cab, and we're trying to determine what the impact would be if a change was made, and we know it's related to this JIRA system, I could simply come here and I'm colorblind, but even though I'm colorblind, we've got the visual here, the X, which means something is impacted, which also means that there's an open ticket associated with this device. So by creating the relationship and understanding what's related, I could quickly come here and see, hey, there's something being impacted here. I need to make a decision regarding that change. I also have the impact and analyze impact option, which again looks at what devices are impacted. In this case here, because of that, I selected that server, it will show me all the other related CIs that would be impacted by a potential change. So again, anybody that's involved with change management, by automating those relationships, which for some customers is today a manual process, by automating them, number one, it most likely gives you the ability to expand the scope of what relationships you're capturing. But then it also eliminates that manual effort of trying to maintain those, and it gives you the same kind of view to understand what the impact would be by having the ability to view these relationships. Another example I wanted to show also is I was just sort of playing with the data, and I looked up a device. It's called MariaDB, which I wasn't even familiar with. I did a little research to find out it's an open source MySQL version of MySQL. But if I open up this device here too, again, and I select the Explorer, it gives me the ability to see, again, the relationship of that database to all the various components. And then if there's any other relationships here, you can drill into them. So again, another big benefit. The other thing to highlight too, and this is somewhat it's independent of the integration with Discovery, but it also has an impact, is if I go back to my prior example here. All right. Why isn't it doing that? Anyway, if I pull up an example, let me just pull up an example here and go back to the relationship tab. You have the ability, and this was introduced in Winter 18, if you're not aware, the ability to customize this view. So it's the concept of a list view. This wasn't exposed until Winter 18. So now you can configure which columns appear, and the beauty of this is not only can you configure the details on the relationship, so here's the relationship, does it have an impact? You can also expose details associated with that linked CI. So in this case here, it's linked to a Microsoft web server. So again, I could add additional detail. Maybe I want to show the status. In this case, it's none, but I could show additional detail. Maybe if it's servers, I could show serial numbers. If I want to show who it's assigned to, again, you have the ability to add additional fields here based on your needs, which wasn't available. So that's a nice new feature. And then just one other example I wanted to show you. If I went to my cloud class here and I pulled up let's see here, I want to take a look at Amazon Web Services as a starting point. And again, I could just start with the Explorer. And you can see here, I've got, I discovered within my environment, I've got the East, Amazon East being used. I could drill down even further. And then maybe I want to drill down further. I want to look at the cloud formation example, and I could drill down to see additional details. So again, it gives you the context to understand, not only what devices are in your environment, but in this case here with the cloud, it will show you all the various cloud components and the relationship across those components, and also, which CIs are being managed within those components. All right, let me jump back, and hopefully we're back to the presentation. And I just want to end this, make sure we've got a few minutes here, just quickly the call to action so that we have some time for Q&A. A couple key things, as I mentioned earlier, make sure you go out and take a look at the FAQs that are out on the community site. If you have any issues finding them, just let us know. Either your BRM or myself know, and we can point you to those. Also take a look at the online content in terms of setting things up and the benefits. There's quite a bit of detail out there. If you guys are interested in learning more about the solution beyond what we've documented and you want to have a discussion, again, reach out to your BMC representative or BRM or even myself if you want to continue the conversation. There are trials available, so really it's a matter of just trialing either one or both of the solutions depending on what you have today. And setting up the integration. And again, it is very easy to set up, but if you do have any questions on the setup, you can reach out to any one of us. And then lastly, sort of independent of today's session, is we've had a number of CMDB webcast sessions. We'd like to continue to have these on a regular basis, monthly, if not bi-monthly. So if you have any suggestions on other topics relating to the CMDB that you're interested in, feel free to reach out to any of us. Because again, we'd like to continue these discussions. And with that, I'd like to open it up. Somebody could take everybody off of mute and see if there are any questions. And you also have the option to post questions online. There's a Q&A option if you prefer for us to read those questions.
John, can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you, yes.
Okay, this is Corey from In Contact. So
Hey,
we
Corey.
met just last week, and
Yep.
so we have a current pentaho population of the Remedyforce CMDB, and we've got several, I wouldn't say a bunch, but several custom fields, something as simple as environment, like production, lab, federal certification.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do with those? I assume those will remain in our CMDB definition, but will not be populated by anything automatically from Discovery. Is there a way to get those automatically? I mean, every time we stand up a new server, it's discovered and it comes over and is going to be populated. We want that field to be either lab, it comes from our lab discovery, or prod from our prod discovery. Is there a way to get those automatically populated using the sync?
Well, how do you do that today? Are you saying that it's a custom field you're manually updating today, or are you taking a feed from?
It's done through pentaho automatically. Cloud Action did that. If it comes from our lab discovery, it says lab. If it comes from our prod discovery, the value is prod, and it's put into the same Remedyforce CMDB with that environment field filled in. So that's being done through pentaho or workflow. So what happens to that?
Well, I don't know. Duncan, I know that there's the ability to configure the mappings, right? So if they want to add additional attributes, they have that ability, correct?
Correct, yes. The CMDB sync within Discovery is a very extensible system. So to add extra data, you would have, if you want to use this integration to replace the pentaho-based system you would have to, again, configure it to populate those attributes. But it's very easy indeed, and there are examples within the product itself about how you extend the mapping to the CMDB to add extra data. So yes, you can do that.
Okay. And I'm thinking you had that discovery, it said status, which is a field or an attribute, showed deployed, and that's a drop-down list. that would also, I assume, then be able to, from the discovery side, simply say everything that goes across is going to be, in build status or deployed or whatever status we want it to be primarily. Okay. Just trying to learn how we're going to go from what we have to this.
Yeah, and we've documented the actual out-of-the-box mappings. So again, if you go online, you can see what's out of the box versus additional fields that you may be interested in syncing. As Duncan mentioned, you could do that through the extensibility, of the integration, but you at least can see what's out of the box versus which ones you may need to modify.
Okay. Just have to learn our way through that then.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Sure. There's a couple questions, Duncan, online I think would be directed to you. The first one is, does Discovery do any kind of compliance, specifically NIST compliance?
Yeah, so the answer to that is not directly, so that you won't find a compliance section within Discovery, but many of our customers do use the data from Discovery to validate their compliance to various things like this compliance, for example. So no, it's not an out-of-the-box capability, but a lot of the information that's collected is pertinent to that kind of compliance task. The other question, sorry, go on, Jim.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's a second one, and I'm having user issues trying to, where's the best place to do service modeling? Discovery, CMDB, or TrueSight?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, and that really depends on why you're modeling services, and it's not an either-or kind of a question. That there is a lot of value in doing what we term application modeling within Discovery itself. And the reason for that is that Discovery is in a position to keep the models that you've made up to date. That the application modeling capabilities that I exceedingly briefly went past in my demo allow you to define that certain parts of the discovered environment are providing a certain application. And when you do that, Discovery understands the connectivity of things, and it will automatically keep it up to date as it changes over time. So from that point of view, that level of service modeling it's valuable to do it in Discovery. But then that data flows into CMDB, and from there can flow into TrueSight, which can make use of service models, at which point potentially you need even more business context about the overall service that it's providing to the business. And so it can make sense to do some of the modeling, as in some of the business context can be most convenient or most effective to apply within the CMDB or within TrueSight directly. It really depends on the problem you're trying to solve, but starting from service modeling or application modeling within Discovery is a very good starting point.
Right. All right, those were the two online. Any other questions? I know we've gone a few minutes over, but for those of you that have stayed on, any other questions that you have? Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody joining. Thank you, Duncan, for presenting. I think it was a great session, hopefully informative for everybody. Again, for those calls to action, again, take a look at the information out there. If you have any questions, reach out to your representative, and we'd like to continue the discussion. So everybody, thank you very much, and have a great day.
Yep. Thank you for your attention.